Channel 2 Action News is investigating claims that the most popular weed killer on the planet causes a rare form of cancer. And you can find it in garages and garden sheds across Georgia. Channel 2's consumer investigator Jim Strickland started investigating when he found the weed killer in his own garage.
My research for this story began by reading the label on the Roundup that I had right in my own garage. The active ingredient is a chemical called glyphosate. I used it on these weeds a couple of days ago, and you can tell that it sucks the life right out of a weed. But the question is, what does it do to people? That's the debate.
On the farm, Roundup makes its biggest impact. According to a recent study, giant sprayers like this have applied 370,000 tons of the active ingredient glyphosate in the United States, most of it in the past 10 years. It coats the Midwest and a swath of Georgia's Farm Belt. Nick McMicken is using it on a North Georgia cotton field.
I handle it myself. I spray it in this sprayer on a regular basis.
Farmer Bill Hammock used it on his 2,000 acres in South Georgia.
He would come home and it would be all over his clothes.
His widow Lisa is suing Roundup maker Monsanto, blaming the chemical for the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that killed Hammock in 2008.
There was clots all up in his nose and everything, and he sucked one of those clots down into his lungs and he choked to death. And I had to watch him choke to death.
It's not just farmers.
I've been using it since the very early 80s.
John Jenigas still has the last bottle he used around his yard in Cobb County. He's awaiting his first chemo treatment after being diagnosed last year with mantle cell lymphoma. He's suing too.
People have died from it. People will continue to die from it. I'll die from it.
In 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, determined glyphosate was probably carcinogenic to humans. The European Union will decide later this year whether to outlaw its use.
It's as safe as these things come to humans and to the environment.
UGA weed expert William Wenzel says that branding glyphosate as cancer-causing is misleading. He says exposure levels, even on the farm, are relatively low.
If there was a serious, systemic toxicological issue, it would have exploded by now.
What has exploded is evidence unsealed in court documents that Monsanto has ghostwritten scientific studies that proclaim Roundup is safe. By email, one top-level executive writes about us doing the writing. That is how we handled Williams, Crows, and Monroe 2000. This is the research paper he's talking about. It concludes Roundup herbicide does not pose a health risk to humans. A 30-year EPA toxicologist also wrote in 2014, it is essentially certain glyphosate causes cancer. 2 months ago, the EPA concluded it did not.
Something becomes enormously profitable, and soon nothing can get in its way.
Attorney Tim Litzenberg represents more than a dozen Georgians suing Monsanto.
If they don't tell you what the risks are, and they don't tell you what precautions you're going to have to take, then it's not just misleading, it's deadly, it's dangerous.
Lisa Hammock says a warning label would have made a difference.
We just didn't know the dangers of it.
On the flip side, Nick McMicken says a world without Roundup would be hungry.
I feel like this is an unfair attack on a herbicide that is helping to feed the world.
Monsanto didn't go on camera, but they did give me 15 minutes with the vice president on the phone. He said that email about ghostwriting scientific studies, that was just bad wording in that email. He says it didn't happen and that the company contributed to studies. He also says there are 800 studies over the past 40 years that say that Roundup is safe. Reporting in Cobb County, Jim Strickland, Channel 2 Action News.